Welcome to English for Engineers. I'm your host, Olivia Augustin. Tune in as I dig deep into all things technical English, business English, and international business communication to bring you a lifetime of knowledge in a digestible format. Hello, friends, fellow engineers, and the occasional word nerd who is listening in. Today's guests at the English for Engineers podcast are Anthoinette Međjedović-van Winkoop and Chelsea Janssen from HTT Helena Technical Translations. Hello, ladies.
Hi.
Hello.
So let me introduce them to you. Anthoinette is the CEO of Helena Helena Technical Translations, and she's been a part of HTT since 2013 and became a co-owner in 2019. So quite recent, 4 years. No, that's quite a long time, 4 years. And she, of course, loves languages and takes pride in finding the best translation solutions for businesses. Chelsea is a junior translator at HTT, and in January of this year, Chelsea started an internship as part of her translation master studies. And after her internship, she stayed as a junior translator, and her favorite translation projects to work on are medical translations. Quite interesting, which already piqued her interest during her master program. A bit about the company. Helena Technical Translations is a certified language service provider, and they have a dedicated in-house team of 20 linguists and project managers who tackle many large and small translation projects every day. And in addition to technical translations, they also specialize in software, HR, medical, and marketing texts. Quite a lot, but you are a big team of 20, so that's enough to do for them. Anthoinette, Chelsea, did I forget anything or?
No. Thank you for this nice introduction. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Okay, good. Let's hit the first question that we have prepared. Because quite often, actually, I get the question of my clients if I could translate something for them, a tech document, tender specifications, a contract, something. And they say like stuff like, oh, Olivia, you're already working with us, you know, our company. Can you just quickly translate that document for us? And I always say no, because I did not study translation. I studied teaching, something completely different. And even though on the outside, technical English teaching and technical translations may seem similar, they're actually quite different. And that's the distinction I want us to explore a bit now. Technical English teaching helps my clients to improve their language skills for technical communication, be that spoken or written. And as a technical English teacher, my skill set is anchored in language and pedagogy. So over to you. Let's ask Chelsea, what is technical translation?
Well, with technical translation, I think we're really focused on interpreting the source text. So, first of all, technical English, teaching it, I think it's mostly focused on the English. And here we have to interpret the source text in such a way that it is understandable and it has to have the same meaning, because especially in technical texts, the meaning is very important, because we do a lot of manuals and they also have a lot of warnings and stuff like that. So it's very important that those are translated with the correct meaning. Otherwise, it can be quite dangerous.
I can imagine, yeah. Good thing IKEA switched to pictures. That's at least for me.
True.
But but that works for bookshelves and not for intricate texts and detailed medical texts. Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't want to have any medical machine put together by a pictogram. It's not a good idea.
No, preferably not.
No. So good thing we have you guys. Who are your target groups that you're translating for? How do you determine if this is that you go into that?
Well, as Chelsea already mentioned, we translate a lot of manuals. So the target group could be a regular user of a device or a machine like you and me. But also we translate the more professional manuals for engineers. Um, we have a wide range of target groups. It's the regular user as well as professional people in all kinds of businesses. So it really depends. The translation, we always have to adapt it to the target group, and we have to use the appropriate style, the appropriate tone, and also very important is the appropriate terminology.
Wow. So it's not just exchanging one English word for one Dutch word. It goes way, way deeper. Yeah.
Yeah, way deeper. Yeah, we can't leave anything out. We have to really, like Chelsea said, convey the correct meaning, but it also has to sound natural. It has to read natural. It has to be real Dutch or real English. So a native speaker will not notice that it's translated. Yeah, so we really have to take into account the target group and the style and tone that's required.
It's really in depth. Even the preparation must be quite in depth. You mentioned something. You said technical texts, and I wanna deepen in on that because sometimes people use the word translate, and sometimes other people use the word interpret when they're talking about a translation. So and there is a difference, but what is the difference between translation and interpreting?
Well, interpreting, of course, there's the interpreting, which is done, for example, simultaneous translation, which is oral, of course, which is, I would say, an entirely different field. Very important as well. So what we do is, of course, written communication, and basically we have to convey the meaning of the text, which means we have to translate what is there. So we don't translate what we think is written. We translate what is actually written, because if the translator starts interpreting the text, then where does it end? You know, of course, we sometimes have to think, well, okay, this is obvious, this or that is meant, or we have to ask the client. But usually, interpreting is not part of our work. We really have to be very accurate about what the text says and not what we think it says. So I think that's a big difference.
Yeah. Would you say it is a correct definition to say translating is written stuff and interpreting is spoken translation, is oral translation?
Yes,
Very
well, it
often
depends
simultaneously.
Correct. It depends on what kind of interpretation you are talking about, because I can imagine that in a translation of literary works, you do have to interpret the text and find a deeper meaning, which is also very interesting, but not something we do. So yeah, that's
You are technical translators. You like facts.
we love facts. Yeah, we
Yeah,
love
me too. Me too. Me too. So there's a very specific skill set you need for that. How does specific training enhance your translation skills, or what kind of specific training, special training do you have? Maybe Chelsea, you want to answer that?
Yeah. Well, I did a master in translation, and there we made a distinction between translation in theory and in practice. So we actually got taught a lot of theory behind translation, which I didn't knew that much theory could be written about translation, but there is actually a lot which some of those theories were about like the approaches to translation. So we try to translate as close to the source text as possible because it's very important. But you also have a type of translation in which you translate the purpose or the function of a text, and that can also be very culturally related. So it's a very broad. There's a lot of theory on that. But we also do more in practice. So I did the specializations medical, literary, and subtitling. But we also had like legal and multimodal, in which you learn more about translating comics and songs, for example.
Ooh, there's a lot of interpreting in there, I guess, in songs especially.
I think it was more the writing. I didn't do it. I didn't do the course, so I don't know it exactly. But I know that they did songs. but we also practice a bit through this. Practice translation through these courses a bit, like we did weekly translations. But I think you learn the most about translation by just doing it, which I did during my internship, which is, I think, when I got the most like experience doing it. But also as in-house translators, we are required to sometimes attend webinars or training sessions, especially client-specific translation sessions about their specific requirements and style. And we, of course, also have to be up to date with translation tools. So we do attend webinars about translation tools because they are constantly renewing and evolving. Yeah.
Every trade has its tools.
Yeah, there are.
They need to
Again,
stay sharp.
yeah, exactly. There are a lot of different tools, and we need to. Well, we don't work with every tool out there, but we do have multiple we work with, and we also have different teams with each their own specialization, and we are offered courses on, for example, medical translations, legal translations, or even like a new source language, so that you can, you know, evolve in that way by learning new languages to translate. But I think it's also very important that you are skilled in the language you're translating to. So we also do workshops in grammar and spelling or style, which can be very client specific as well.
Let me just ask, you are doing Dutch is your mother language, but you're still doing courses for Dutch.
Well,
Did I understand that right?
I
Like
think
style and grammar and stuff.
yeah, because we translate in Dutch, and sometimes it can get quite tricky. An example is like, when do you write compound nouns together? Like, or when is there like koppelingsteken, koppelteken?
Yes.
So those kind of
A dash
things.
in between. Yeah.
Yeah, just to like freshen up our knowledge and
That
stuff.
is I think that is such an important information for a lot of the listeners, because going back to the question that I'm asked by customers, mostly I get asked to translate stuff from English into German, which is my mother language. And I haven't been living in a German-speaking country for 12 years. And I have to say, I'm starting to forget German,
Yeah, you get
because
rusty.
I don't use written German. I speak my accent, my dialect at home. So even you living in a Dutch speaking country, speaking Dutch every day, but as a translator, you even have to keep up with your mother language. That's how
because we
much a trade that you have to learn translation is.
yes,
It's not
exactly.
something I could just
No, because we also have different dialects. So I think I know that my parents came from another part of the Netherlands where I live now. So there are already a lot of different words or like grammar
and language evolves
aspects.
with time as
And it
well.
evolves, yeah. So that's very important, I think, to also keep up to date with.
Yeah. Wow. So there is a lot of education going on to become not only skilled, but you guys are certified translators. So want to point that out. Very important.
Thank you.
Chelsea, thank you so much. Maybe another question, because you mentioned so often now that you're communicating with your clients as well. Take us behind the scenes a little bit. Please take us behind the scenes of high quality translations, from the initial contact with a client to your optimal perfect result. Can you walk us through the process of hiring you as a translator, and how do you go on with a project? Maybe Anthoinette, you can explain that, how that works. If, let's say, I'm your client, I'm an engineer, I have a tender documentation I want you to translate, for example.
Yeah, sure, I can explain this. First of all, before getting into the process, I might want to explain the big difference between our two types of clients that we have. We only work business to business, so all clients are professional businesses or people. But we work a lot with international translations agencies based in the US, for example, and based in elsewhere in Europe, based all over the world. So that's a big difference, because they are already in the translation business and they send us prepared packages. We have prices already agreed with them. So they are basically like, our clients that know
Brokers,
exactly what goes on in the translation world. So that's a different way of working. Like if we work with direct clients, for example, an engineer that works in a company and that needs a manual translated, they would send us a document, either through the contact form on our website or via email. And then we will check the document and check the format. Is it Word? Is it PDF? Does it need work beforehand? What language is it? Sometimes a document contains different languages. So the first important step is to look at the documents. And then we will analyze the document using a CAT tool, so a translation tool. So we know how many words it contains, if there are repetitions in the file. If it's a client we've worked with before, we have built up a translation memory for the client for each language combination that we've translated into for them. So we already have a database.
That?
It's a translation memory. It's we also call it a TM. It's basically a database with, on the left you have the source language, for example, English, and on the right you have the target language, for example, Dutch. So if you've already translated a manual for, let's say, a headphone for a client, and the client needs an update of that particular manual next year, and maybe not much has changed, we will only have to translate the new parts because the older parts are already present in the translation memory.
And it makes, and it you make sure with that you can make sure to always use the same terminology.
Correct.
So
Yes,
it's easier
also
to
very
read for the
important
client at the end. Yeah.
for consistency purposes as well. It's very important because you want to use the same terms, and you want the user to be familiar with the terminology and with the wording. But it is important to check it in the new context. So we don't just skip over the old translation, and we always check what is the new context. Are there any other changes? Is there? We don't just skip over it. It's important to see the document as a whole. So I do want to point that out. So yeah, after we've made the analysis, we will use this to make a quotation for our direct clients, and we will send it through them to them. And then if we receive the order, we will ask them for reference material, any additional links, style guides, anything they want to share with us that can be useful to make the translation. And then we will select a translator and a reviewer as well. And of course, we want to use a translator that is familiar with the subject matter. So, for example, if it's a legal translation, we want to have a legal translator translating the document. Well, then we prepare the translation project, and we will upload the files to our business manager, where the translators can download the files and look at all the details of the project. And then we will go through the entire translation review and quality assessment process, which Chelsea will go into a bit more in a minute. And after we've gone through that entire process, we will make a final check of the file, just to look at the file in the final format, see if everything looks right, if it's complete. And we will send it through to the client either via email or via portal or our business management system. We, of course, want it to be safe, so we always want to share files in a safe manner. It's also very important. And then the client has the opportunity to send us feedback and ask questions about the translations, or say, oh, I noticed that you translated this term such and such, please, we would like it to have it differently. So that's also actually a very important step of the entire translation process to have feedback and communicate with the clients about the final product so you can make it even better and more according to their wishes.
I know that this is really a quick summary how it works,
Yes,
and it's already sounds very painstaking. It's like so detailed and so much attention on details. It's just a big wow from from me, because how much work. I think it's so important to show the listeners that doesn't work, but to make sure the listeners or engineers in general know how much work goes into a proper translation process. It's nothing you can do just 5 minutes after finishing your workday. So much work goes into that, and so much education. So you already mentioned a translator, a reviewer. So that reviewing process is part of a high quality translation process. How do you navigate feedback? What happens if you're getting feedback, client is happy with a translation, wants changes, or how do you handle feedback from the reviewer going back to the translator? How does that work in real life?
I think usually when our in-house translator and reviewers, like first the translation happens, then the review happens. These are usually from people on the same team. So once the review has been done, sometimes, but not always, we will save a text with the track changes so that a translator can see the feedback and learn from it, but usually the reviewer delivers the text. So the reviewer corrects the text and then sends it to the client. Sometimes we do also get feedback from the client. This can be like to confirm certain terms. They will ask, is this term translated correctly in this context or does it need modification? But sometimes it also uses a list from a quality assessment tool. I don't think we've touched upon that yet, but as part of the review, we do a quality assessment. Usually, we do it in a program called Xbench, but sometimes clients have their own specific tool that we use for that. And the quality assessment, this can also depend on what a client wants, but it usually checks the terminology style. Does the punctuation correspond to that of the source text? Is the spelling okay? Do the numbers that occur in the source text also occur in the target text like that? Sometimes also conversions of, for example, in English, they use a point to indicate the decimal, but in Dutch, we use a comma. So it also tracks things like that. And sometimes we get a list from the client with those possible mistakes. Sometimes they are false positives because when they check terminology, words can be interpreted differently. They can mean different things. So not always does the list include actual mistakes. But if they do contain mistakes, then we correct those and we send the document with comments back to the client, and then it's usually good.
There was one thing, and I was smiling when I received Anthoinette's email. When we prepared the podcast, you were mentioning a 4I principle, and I thought it's the I like in the letter I, and I thought, okay, maybe it's for, I for indication, I for internal check, I for, I don't know, whatever. I thought, okay, they will explain it in the podcast. And then you wrote me that email and said, no, it's 4 eyes, like the eyes you have in your head. And I'm
Correct,
like, oh yeah, that makes way more sense.
Well, I guess now you will never forget this principle.
I will never forget. And I now consider that email a review email from you, because you did spot a mistake and you marked it immediately. And I learned something.
I have to admit that the feedback process, sometimes I also use it at home.
Yeah, we all take work home, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm married to an engineer, and a lot of processes in how we handle our shared calendars. It reminds us very much of how project management is done. We all take work home, unfortunately, but sometimes it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Antoinette, do you want to explain a bit about that four eyes principle? How do you use? What is it, and how do you use it?
Well, it's actually a very important pillar of the entire translation process. It's really built on that. As you already mentioned, we are a certified translation provider, which means that we comply to the ISO norm. Actually, we comply to the ISO norm, the ISO standard for translation and for post editing as well. Post editing is checking a machine translation and adapting it so it becomes a correct and human translation. But in all these processes, we adopt the 4I principle, which means that a text is always seen by at least two linguists. So it's translated by a linguist that is knowledgeable about uh, the subject matter, and then it is reviewed by a reviewer. So that's already 4 eyes. And then sometimes, there's maybe even a second reviewer checking the text. And Chelsea also mentioned quality assessment. So that might also be done, for example, by a project manager. They might perform an additional quality check. So, but it's at least 4 eyes that are always handling a translation project. And we also, we have a large team of in-house translators. But for example, if we need a translation from English into German, we will ask a native speaker. And they are like colleagues. We've worked with them for many years, and they are usually based in Germany or another German-speaking country. And we also check their work, of course. So even if we do outsource a translation, it's always checked again internally. We have a background in German as well, so we can review German texts. But for example, if it's a Japanese translation, we will outsource it to a company that is also certified and works according to the 4I principle. But we will also perform an additional quality check in-house, even though the company already does it themselves as well. But,
The more the
so
merrier.
the more the merrier. And we always have to be able to guarantee this principle. And the fact that we are certified, we are actually being audited each year. And then an auditor comes to our office and interviews us as management, and also interviews a translator, a reviewer. They check our processes. They check our business management system, and we have to make sure that we can show this process. So we have to make sure that we can show that we work according to this 4I principle. And we have to make sure that we can show that we are using skilled translators that have a background in translation or in engineering. You can also be a translator if you are an engineer, if you are not knowledgeable about a certain subject, but you have to, in order for the translation to be certified, you have to have at least 2 years of professional experience as a translator. So that's very
And
important.
listening to you, how you have set up your company, I guess that even if you have engineers working with you with 2 years experience, I guess in their team, there's still a linguist.
Of
They
course.
work together.
Yes. Yeah, it works like that. So you can.
That's a perfect combination, actually.
Yeah, it's really
Because
great.
you have
Yeah.
both backgrounds then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
cool.
you have always, but we always say you have to translate like nobody is checking your work, and you have to review like the translator. If you already assume, okay, this is a good translator, I will just not spend too much time on this. No, you always have to be critical and you have to be alert. So yeah, it's
Prepare
very
for the
important.
worst, expect nothing, and be happy if it. Yeah, that's a good. Blah, blah, blah. I'm repeating myself. Good thing I'm not a translator. No, that's another really good principle to translate like nobody's watching, like you're the only one, and review without any expectations. Because
Yeah,
then
just be critical and try to deliver the best work possible. I mean, we're still humans.
yeah,
Yeah,
good
that's
thing
what
we are.
good thing we are. So yeah, it's an
Yeah.
important part of our work.
Interesting. So interesting. Quality assessment was something you mentioned, and I like the terminology. And you have checklists, what you have to like, tone of voice, style, using the correct terminology, and so on. And that's actually something, that's a tip that I give my engineering clients a lot when they have to write emails and reports in English for their projects. I always say, you know what kind of mistakes you tend to make. You know that you're always forgetting a comma. You know that you're forgetting the period at the end of a sentence. You know that you're forgetting the third person S after a verb. Just write your own checklist, and before you hit send, go through your own checklist, because you know where your where the most mistakes happen. Just make your own quality assessment sheet. So I'm,
Yeah,
I'm
you
going
can.
to, I'm rephrasing it, because I'm always telling them make your own checklist, but I'm rephrasing it. And from now on, I will call it make your own quality assessment list. It sounds
Yes.
so much better.
And
Yeah, be your own reviewer.
yeah.
Be your own reviewer. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that a lot. That's my takeaway already. Talking about the engineers that are hopefully listening, do you have a number one tip, or even more, for engineers, for engineering companies who request your service? What are actionable tips you can provide for engineers in international projects, so that they, for example, so that they can make your work easier and the
Well,
translations better?
we're so happy that you asked this question.
We have a
Thank
few.
you. Yeah, we have
Okay,
one.
you have another half hour. Go on.
No, we have a number one tip, and it's something you also mentioned at the beginning. It's don't forget about the translator. Please be sure that you have some time for us, because it's not very helpful if we have to translate something last minute. If, for example, a lot of time goes into content creation, for example, websites or manuals, and with nice picture and nice layout and things like that. And then at the end of a project, they're like, oh no, it still has to be translated into 5 languages. Oh no, the deadline is next week. That's something we experience very often. And of course, we know how to act, and we will deliver the best translation possible. But please don't forget about us. And you really get better results if the translator also has enough time to do their work. And for example, in formats, in layouts, engineers sometimes also forget that English is actually shorter than most other languages. So that's also a problem that you might run into last minute. So it's really important to have enough time for the translations and put them in the right place in the document or on the website. And yeah, that's our number one tip. So don't forget about the translator.
Translators.
I think one very important actionable tip for us is please provide context, because sometimes we are translating a text, and sometimes these are lists of words or like instructions, and without a surrounding context, it's really difficult for us to correctly translate it, and it's just much more susceptible to mistranslation. So a source file can already help a lot for us to see in what context was the English. For example, the other week I did a translation that included the term service, which in Dutch is usually onderhoud, or like to service a vehicle or a device.
And the maintenance.
Yeah, maintenance, exactly. So in this context, without a context, I would have translated it like that. But in the source file, it became clear that because it was in a table next to the term service brake, so in this case, service was related to a brake and not to the servicing of vehicles.
Something.
So without the context, I would probably have translated it as service, because it also usually appears in glossaries like that. So yeah, context is very important, I think, to provide.
Context is everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. Context is everything. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Thank you so much. Those are your the two main tips: provide context and provide time.
Yeah, and also we have one more that might be
go on, Anthoinette.
actually if because I know engineers, they are very knowledgeable about what they do and the technical devices they are working with. If they have any available terminology, a list of, even if it's a list only in English or in German or just one language, of the most important terminology, please spend some time and send it to us beforehand, because then we already know what is important and we can pay extra attention to this. So yeah, because our terminology lists, we actually have an entire software program to incorporate them in our translations and perform extra checks with these lists. So yeah, if you have the chance to provide us with those, please do, because I think it will really help your translation.
Yeah. So to summarize those 3 tips, it's time, context, and more details.
Yeah.
More of everything. More is better.
Yeah, and
more time,
also,
more context, more details. Yeah.
Yes, and also because as we already mentioned, the translation business, we have to work with very short deadlines. So if you do have feedback or if we've asked some questions, it's always helpful if the communication is swift as well. It will also benefit the end product and the client as well. So yeah,
So with more time, more context, more details, you get more quality at the end.
Correct. Yes. It's yeah. Don't just send a text and then never think about it anymore. We actually love to be in communication with our clients about the text. And if you have any pictures, for example, pictures are always great. Sometimes we have to translate text about fabrics and tapestry, and then you have these wonderful explanations of the look and the feel, but we're always like, we would really love a picture. What does it look like? You know, the descriptions are great, but the pictures are not always available. So things like that really help us.
Cool. Thank you so much for all that input. That was so valuable, really, really, really valuable. And I hope that all the engineers who are listening to this episode they got a little bit of background information, what goes into translation. And I hope that all the engineers listening to have more appreciation for translators now as well. And thank you so much, Chelsea and Anthoinette. And if you, dear listener, now, if you think, I need Anthoinette and her team's expertise, as always, I'll link her company details and the contact details at the end of the podcast subscription. And you can reach them via email address and LinkedIn and Facebook and website that I'm posting down there. Thank you so much for having time for me and doing that interview, Anthoinette and Chelsea. It was really, really great having you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
It was my pleasure. I could go on talking. That was it. This was English for Engineers. I'm your host, Olivia Augustin. Talk to you soon.